Welcome back to Crypto Equation, the place where we decode the future of money. And today we step into a story that few people truly understand. A story that has been unfolding quietly beneath global markets. A story shaped by technology, governments, institutions, and the silent evolution of the digital financial system. Because while most people argue on social media about which crypto might rise or fall, a far more serious battle is already taking place behind the scenes. A battle not for speculation but for infrastructure, not for hype but for global settlement, not for traders but for the future architecture of money itself. This is the real truth behind the growing tension between XRP and XLM, and the financial war neither side openly acknowledges but every institution is paying attention to. To understand this story, you must first understand that XRP and XLM are not just digital assets. They are two competing visions of how the world might move value in the next financial era. They were born from similar origins, built by some of the same minds, yet designed for two different missions. And today, those missions have placed them on opposite sides of one of the most important technological transformations in modern history, the shift from slow, fragmented financial rails to instant digital settlement. Most beginners think XRP and XLM compete for retail attention, but the truth is far more complex. These two assets represent two possible pathways for how global value might move. One pathway is institution-focused, structured, built for high-volume settlement with banks, liquidity providers, and payment giants. The other pathway is people-focused, built for open access, flexibility, community-driven innovation, and lightweight remittances. Together, they represent two halves of the same global transformation. But in a financial world where only one settlement standard is likely to dominate on a global scale, competition becomes inevitable. This is the financial war, unfolding quietly, as governments and institutions evaluate which rails will support the next era of money. To understand the tension, you must understand the foundation. XRP was engineered for the institutional world. It was built for speed, stability, compliance alignment, and global settlement. It is a liquidity engine designed to move capital across borders instantly without relying on outdated banking rails. It focuses on efficiency, scale, and integration into structured financial systems. XLM, on the other hand, was engineered for inclusion. It was built for accessibility, affordability, decentralization, and community empowerment. It focuses on lightweight transfers, micropayments, and reaching populations that traditional systems overlook. Both are powerful. Both are meaningful. Both serve a purpose. But the world is now entering a stage where governments and institutions are choosing which technologies will form the backbone of global settlement. And in these decisions, purpose becomes competition. The truth institutions never say publicly is that global settlement cannot rely on 20 different standards. Eventually, the world will converge on a small number of rails that allow value to move as easily as information. This creates the first layer of the financial war. XRP and XLM represent two competing models for how value could move efficiently across borders. One model is structured, one is distributed, one aligns with institutions, one aligns with people. And in a world where financial power is shifting, these models begin to collide. To understand why this collision matters, you must understand the transformation already underway. The world is digitizing money. Nations are creating digital currencies. Banks are modernizing settlement systems. Payment networks are evolving. Companies are tokenizing value. And international systems are preparing to integrate digital assets directly into financial architecture. This shift requires a settlement layer capable of connecting everything instantly. That layer could be XRP. That layer could be XLM. That layer could be both in different sectors, but the global system will not support endless fragmentation. This is where the hidden competition begins. Institutions evaluate the settlement landscape quietly. They test corridors privately. They build pilot programs with confidentiality. They analyze throughput speed, regulatory compatibility, and risk exposure. And in these evaluations, XRP and XLM appear repeatedly because both assets were designed for fast, efficient value movement. But institutions do not choose based on popularity. They choose based on structure, they choose based on purpose, they choose based on long-term stability. XRP's design fits the institutional world. It provides liquidity movement for large transfers. It offers a settlement engine built for high-volume corridors. It integrates with institutional compliance models. It handles complex multi-currency transactions through neutral bridging. These features align with the needs of banks and payment giants. XLM's design fits the accessible world. It offers lightweight transfers for individuals. It minimizes fees. It supports open networks for global communities. It emphasizes decentralization over institutional structure. These features align with the needs of people, not institutions. And this difference is what creates the silent financial war. Because if the world chooses a single dominant rail for global liquidity, institutions are more likely to choose the system built for institutions. But if the world chooses a settlement layer that empowers populations directly, then accessibility becomes more important than structured liquidity. What the world chooses depends on regulation, geopolitical strategy, economic forces, and technological scale. That is why both XRP and XLM exist in a strange tension. Neither can openly acknowledge competition, but both evolve in ways that reveal it. Now let us go deeper into the institutional perspective. Institutions do not adopt systems based on community hype. They adopt systems based on compliance, clarity, stability, and risk mitigation. This is where XRP's architecture shines. It was designed to integrate with banking infrastructure. It provides deterministic settlement. It maintains predictable performance under high load. It supports corporate-level liquidity systems. Institutions recognize these advantages even if they do not publicly announce them. But institutions also recognize the value of open systems and decentralized models. XLM shines in environments requiring lightweight access, low-cost transfers, and inclusive financial tools. Governments exploring digital identity systems and community-driven payment frameworks often evaluate XLM because it supports scalability without heavy institutional requirements. These two roles create different strengths, different markets, different layers of global finance. But the deeper the digital transformation becomes, the more these layers collide. This brings us into the emotional core of the financial war. XRP and XLM are not enemies, but they are competitors in a global race whose outcome will influence billions of people. XRP seeks to upgrade the rails institutions rely on. XLM seeks to upgrade the rails populations rely on. And as the world becomes digital, the institutions that shape financial control and the populations that demand financial access are on a collision course. To understand the shock behind this competition, you must understand how digital financial transformation works. When the world adopted the internet, one communication protocol became dominant. When the world adopted mobile technology, one wireless standard became dominant. When the world adopted digital media, one streaming architecture became dominant. Global systems eventually centralize around efficiency. That is why the fight for settlement standards matters so deeply. If XRP becomes the backbone of institutional settlement, it will shape how banks, governments, and corporations move trillions of dollars daily. If XLM becomes the backbone of accessible payments, it will shape how people send money, earn money, store money, and interact with digital economies. Both systems matter. Both systems compete. And both systems represent two visions for the future. Here is where most people misunderstand the story. They think XRP and XLM compete directly in the same market. They do not. They compete indirectly through the evolution of global financial architecture. XRP competes in institutional corridors. XLM competes in community corridors. XRP targets high-value settlement. XLM targets low-fee access. But as the world digitizes, these corridors begin merging. The more financial systems integrate digital rails, the more settlement models converge, and convergence breeds competition. Now let us examine the roots of this tension because the origins matter. XRP and XLM share early connections through one of the creators, but that connection eventually diverged into two different philosophies. One philosophy believed institutions needed better settlement tools. The other believed people needed better financial access. These two philosophies shaped the architecture. Architecture shaped adoption pathways. Adoption pathways shaped competition. Competition shaped the financial war. This is the shocking part. Institutions rarely choose systems designed for people. Populations rarely choose systems designed for institutions. But the digital future requires a bridge between these realities. XRP offers the bridge. XLM offers the openness. The world must choose how these two roles blend. That choice determines which asset gains broader presence in global infrastructure. Now let us examine the infrastructure war quietly unfolding. Governments are developing digital currencies. Payment companies are integrating blockchain. Banks are experimenting with real-time settlement. International networks are redesigning cross-border rails. In each case, institutions evaluate which digital assets can support their needs. XRP appears frequently in large-scale tests. XLM appears frequently in accessible platform tests. Both are part of the future, but not equally. Institutions hold the majority of global liquidity. People hold the majority of transactions. Institutions control rails. People control volume. The crypto world often argues about which asset wins, but institutions do not think in terms of winners. They think in terms of systems. Systems require stability. Systems require predictability. Systems require efficiency. XRP fits institutional stability. XLM fits public accessibility. The real financial war is not about one destroying the other, The real war is about which system becomes dominant in which part of the global architecture. And the shocking truth is that the world might choose structure over openness, or it might choose openness over structure. The public often assumes decentralization always wins, but institutions often assume centralization always wins. The future will be shaped by which side adapts better, not which side argues louder. This first half of our journey exposes the foundations of the financial war between XRP and XLM. But the second half goes deeper into the global transformation already underway, examining how governments, payment giants, corporations, and new digital economies are choosing sides quietly before the world realizes the magnitude of what is happening. Because the deeper we go, the clearer it becomes that the financial war between XRP and XLM is not a battle fought in public, but a silent race unfolding across the hidden corridors of global finance, where governments evaluate digital strategies, where corporations design long-term architecture, where banks test new rails under confidentiality, and where institutions decide quietly which networks will hold the future of value. What the public sees is surface-level arguments. What institutions see is infrastructure, and that is where this story intensifies. To understand why this quiet war is escalating, you must understand the transformation governments are undergoing. Nations are building digital currencies. Central banks are modernizing payment systems. Regulators are aligning definitions of digital assets. International organizations are drafting global standards for digital settlement. These developments require a settlement layer that can connect digital currencies across borders with instant liquidity. XRP fits this requirement because it was designed for institutional bridging. XLM fits this requirement because it was designed for lightweight community-based transfers. Both fit different sides of the same global shift. As governments digitize their financial systems, they must choose tools that align with their priorities. Some prioritize efficiency and integration. Some prioritize openness and accessibility. And this choice determines which network gains influence. Institutions, meanwhile, must adapt quickly, because digital finance will not be optional. New rails will be required. Settlement cycles will be transformed. Liquidity models will be redesigned. Compliance will become automated. Cross-border value movement will operate in seconds, not days. In this world, institutions look for reliability. That reliability pushes them towards systems built for institutional scale. XRP was engineered for this environment, but open digital economies also push institutions to consider accessible networks that support global populations that pushes them towards systems like XLM. Now let us examine payment giants because they sit in the middle of this transformation. Payment companies require both speed and accessibility. They connect individuals to institutions. They bridge the retail world with the corporate world. They move billions of small transfers and millions of large transfers daily. To operate efficiently in the digital future, they need settlement rails that support both institutional liquidity and lightweight access. This forces them to analyze both XRP and XLM because both networks offer solutions, but in different contexts. The financial war emerges here because payment giants must eventually choose a primary settlement backbone. Next, we look at corporations. Corporations do not adopt technology based on popularity. They adopt based on efficiency and scalability. As tokenization expands, corporations need settlement engines capable of moving digital assets globally. XRP is built for structured corporate rails. XLM is built for flexible, community-oriented rails. Corporations that focus on large-scale integrations lean toward institutional networks. Corporations that focus on user-facing digital payments lean toward accessible networks. This creates another layer of the silent competition as both XRP and XLM evolve to attract enterprise attention. Another key layer involves remittance companies. Remittances depend on speed, affordability, and access. They serve millions of people sending money to families across borders. XLM excels in this environment because fees are low and transactions are lightweight. XRP excels when those remittance companies scale and need institutional liquidity. This means both networks may compete or collaborate depending on corridor size and market requirements. But eventually, remittance systems will unify under streamlined settlement architecture, and whichever asset provides the best blend of efficiency and scale will dominate those corridors. Now let us examine the global economic context. The world is fragmenting into new financial blocks. Some nations align with Western financial systems, others align with emerging digital infrastructure. In every case, digital settlement is becoming a competitive advantage. Nations that modernize faster will become global leaders in trade finance and innovation. To modernize, they need fast bridging systems that connect national financial systems. This is where XRP and XLM enter the conversation because both offer cross-border capabilities. but nations choose based on compatibility with their economic model. Structured nations prefer institutional systems. Developing nations prefer accessible systems. This geopolitical dynamic shapes the financial war more than any retail discussion ever could. The deeper truth is that the world is choosing architecture, not assets. Architecture controls liquidity movement. Architecture controls settlement timing. Architecture controls how digital currencies interact. Architecture controls how value flows between institutions, governments, and people. XRP and XLM offer two different types of architecture. XRP offers a high-throughput institutional backbone. XLM offers an accessible public network. The world needs both, but it will not elevate both equally. One will lead global settlement. The other will lead global access. The shock comes from realizing that these roles overlap more than people assume. Next, we must examine the technological war. Both networks aim for speed, transparency, and efficiency. But institutional requirements are far stricter than public requirements. Institutions need deterministic settlement, predictable performance stability, under high load, and compliance integration. XRP provides these features. Populations need affordability, decentralization access, and flexible transaction formats. XLM provides these features. Both networks compete to improve features associated with institutional adoption and public adoption. The more each evolves, the more their roles converge, and the more intense the competition becomes. The emotional core of this story emerges when you realize that the financial war is not a conflict between communities, but between visions of the future. One vision imagines a world where institutions modernize and operate on digital rails with full control of liquidity movement. The other vision imagines a world where populations access financial tools without reliance on traditional systems. Each vision shapes the evolution of global value, and as these visions collide, the networks behind them evolve aggressively to capture their share of the digital future. Now let us address the motivations driving institutional preference. Institutions prefer systems that integrate smoothly with their existing structure. They prefer systems with strong governance frameworks. They prefer predictable processing. They prefer systems designed with regulatory clarity. XRP aligns with these preferences because it was engineered for institutional settlement. Institutions view it as a tool, not a speculative instrument. This increases its credibility in the institutional world, even when public markets misunderstand its purpose. Meanwhile, communities in developing markets prefer accessibility. They prefer networks that do not require institutional permission. They prefer systems that support low-cost transfers. They prefer flexibility and autonomy. XLM aligns with these preferences because it is lightweight, efficient, and community-oriented. Governments that focus on inclusion often evaluate XLM for digital payment programs. This gives XLM influence in sectors where institutional rails cannot easily operate. These two forces, population-driven digitalization and institution-driven modernization, accelerate the global financial transition. XRP and XLM evolve to meet these demands. But as modern financial architecture emerges, the separation between population rails and institutional rails becomes smaller. Central bank digital currencies require both institutional settlement and public access. Global commerce requires both high-value processing and lightweight transfers. Future financial systems require both structure and inclusivity. This creates a direct intersection where XRP and XLM begin competing for the same corridors. Another truth institutions rarely discuss publicly is the race to create digital liquidity hubs. Liquidity hubs are the future engines of global settlement. They determine how fast and efficiently value can move between currencies. XRP is designed for these hubs. XLM is capable of supporting decentralized liquidity networks. Both networks represent different models for future liquidity. Whichever dominates liquidity hubs will influence the global financial landscape for decades. This is the hidden battleground. Now let us examine innovation cycles. Networks evolve in response to global demand. XRP's ecosystem has expanded into tokenization, interoperability, stable settlement layers, and institutional tooling. XLM has expanded into community payments, humanitarian use cases, digital identity experiments, and lightweight stable asset transfers. As both ecosystems evolve, they begin targeting the same opportunities. This creates friction. Friction creates competition. Competition creates acceleration. Acceleration shapes the future. Another key dynamic in the financial war involves timing. Institutions adopt technology slowly until the moment adoption becomes necessary. Populations adopt technology quickly when access improves. XRP moves on institutional timelines. XLM moves on open market timelines. But global transformation compresses timelines. The faster the world digitizes, the faster institutions must adapt. The faster economies change, the faster populations demand innovation. This compression pushes both networks into overlapping trajectories. Now let us examine where trust fits into this war. Institutions trust systems designed for stability. They trust networks with predictable behavior. They trust standardized models. Populations trust systems that empower them. They trust networks that remove barriers. They trust freedom more than structure. These two trust models shape the financial war. XRP aligns with institutional trust. XLM aligns with public trust. As digital economies expand, trust becomes a measurable asset. The most shocking truth is that both networks are necessary, but the world may not treat them equally. Institutions have more power than populations when designing financial architecture, but populations have more influence than institutions when demanding change. The global financial war is the collision between power and influence. The technology that supports institutions may dominate global settlement. The technology that supports populations may dominate global interaction. Now let us explore the long-term implications. If XRP becomes the primary institutional settlement, real global liquidity will flow through structured systems built for stability. Banks and governments will operate on fast digital rails designed for large-scale efficiency. If XLM becomes the dominant public rail, global payments will become decentralized, affordable, and accessible to billions. The world may combine these two roles, but at scale, one network always leads. Leadership determines influence. Influence determines direction. Another important truth is that this war is not defined by conflict, but by evolution. Both networks evolve because the world demands it. Instant settlement demands it. Tokenization demands it. Digital currencies demand it. Cross-border commerce demands it. Financial modernization demands it. As demand intensifies, the networks designed for value movement become central to global change. The final truth is that the financial war is not about destroying competition. It is about shaping the future. XRP and XLM represent two visions of that future. One structured, one open, one institutional, one accessible, one governed, one flexible, one optimized for global financial architecture, one optimized for global population infrastructure. Where these visions merge determines how the world will move value in the next era of digital finance. The shock does not come from discovering that XRP and XLM compete. The shock comes from realizing that the competition is not about markets, but about the future of money itself. This is the financial war unfolding quietly in the shadows of global transformation. And the people who understand it now will see the world changing long before everyone else finally realizes what was happening behind the scenes all along. The real financial war is not about one destroying the other. The real war is about which system becomes dominant in which part of the global architecture. And the shocking truth is that the world might choose structure over openness, or it might choose openness over structure. The public often assumes decentralization always wins, but institutions often assume centralization always wins. The future will be shaped by which side adapts better, not which side argues louder. This first half of our journey exposes the foundations of the financial war between XRP and XLM. But the second half goes deeper into the global transformation already underway, examining how governments, payment giants, corporations, and new digital economies are choosing sides quietly before the world realizes the magnitude of what is happening.